What kind of person pours concrete into a levying creek and thinks they can outsmart nature itself? That's the question I kept asking myself as I stood in my muddy backyard, the air thick with swamp rot and the distant wail of flood warnings. My name's Tom, and this is the story of how my quiet little creek turned into a war zone, sank a neighborhood, and brought down the most insufferable HOA you could imagine. It all started with that creek, a skinny ribbon of water weavying through my backyard. After long days welding pipes or crawling under houses, I'd drag an old folding chair to its edge, crack a beer, and let the world fade away. Dragonflies danced over the reeds, the air smelled like wet grass, and the only sound was the soft gurgle of water slipping over rocks. It was my slice of peace, the kind you don't mess with. But then came the HOA, led by a woman named Linda Harper, who thought she could rewrite the laws of nature with a clipboard and a fake smile. The HOA had been around for years on the other side of the development, with their cookie-cutter beige houses and perfectly timed Halloween pumpkins. My side, the creek side, was the last holdout of the old day fields, dirt roads, and freedom. But when the neighborhood lines got redrawn, the HOA slithered in like a snake in tall grass. Linda showed up on my porch one muggy Saturday, her pastel yoga outfit screaming, "I don't actually exercise." She clutched her clipboard like a weapon and announced she was the HOA's Community Standards Chair. Her concern? My creek. Apparently it was an unauthorized water feature, a danger to kids and wildlife. I stared at her, half expecting her to accuse my grass of tax evasion. That creek was older than both of us, carved into the land long before her McMansion existed. I told her it was protected by county law and my deed. She didn't care. She had saw rules saw. 2 days later, a violation notice was taped to my door, accusing me of unsafe open water and attracting non-native species, because frogs are invaders now. I ignored it. A week later, another notice threatened to law 100 daily fines unless I fixed the creek. I sent back a letter quoting county codes, but they didn't budge. Instead, they sent 3 strangers to my backyard with tape measures and smartphones, snapping photos like I was running a drug cartel. Linda watched from the sidelines, tapping her foot like she owned the place. At the next HOA meeting, which I only attended to shut them up, she stood before a room of bored neighbors and declared my creek a safety hazard, citing mosquitoes, erosion, and insurance risks. The irony of her levying next to a swamp was lost on her. When I argued, she handed me a packet demanding I fence the creek, fill it in, or pay for weekly inspections. I told her where to shove it, politely. Things got ugly fast. Anonymous complaints about my overgrown yard appeared on my doorstep. My mailbox was knocked over. Someone dumped rocks into the creek, clogging it just enough to make it pool. I caught Linda snapping photos of my yard from her SUV, engine running like she was in a bad detective movie. But I held my ground. That creek was mine, and I'd be damned if I let her ruin it. Then came the morning I'll never forget. I was sipping coffee on my porch when I heard the rumble of heavy machinery. At first I thought it was road work, but the sound got closer. I stepped outside just as a cement truck backed down the alley beside my house, guided by a guy in a neon vest. Before I could process it, they swung a chute over my creek and started pouring concrete. Thick, gray sludge swallowed the pebbles, smothered the reeds, and drowned the water. Frogs leapt desperately, some too slow, trapped in the hardening mess. I shouted, wavying my arms, but slipped in the mud and hit the ground hard. By the time I got up, the creek was gone, a lifeless, concrete scar stretching across my yard. The driver kept pouring, the vest guy nodded at his clipboard, and Linda watched from the sidewalk, arms crossed, smiling like she just checkmated me. Rage burned through me, but as I stood there, mud and blood dripping, I smiled back. She thought she'd won. She had no idea what she'd unleashed. The first rain felt like a gift. Heavy sheets of water rolled in, hammering the streets and turning my lawn into a sponge. Normally, the creek would have swallowed the runoff, but now there was just that slick, useless concrete. Water hit it, swirled, and backed up, pooling across my yard and spilling into the street. By noon, the sidewalk was ankle-deep in murky runoff. Across the street, Linda stood under a giant umbrella, smirking as water lapped at her flower beds. She thought she'd tamed the problem. She was wrong. 2 storms later, the neighborhood started to crack. Mrs. Larson's basement turned into a soggy mess. Mr. Rodriguez sandbagged his porch as runoff poured toward his door. Gutters overflowed, streets became ponds, and cars got stuck in brown sludge. Every time, the HOA blamed the homeowners' bad lawn grading, clogged drains, anything but their concrete disaster. Linda pushed new fines and due 250 drainage inspections, never mentioning the creek. I stayed quiet, but I wasn't idle. I walked the neighborhood with my old Nikon, snapping photos of flooded yards and submerged mailboxes. I flew my drone after storms, capturing how the water refused to flow. I kept a notebook, dates, times, damages. Nobody noticed. They were too busy fighting each other, accusing neighbors of blocking drains or redirecting runoff. Linda leaned into the chaos, heading a flood mitigation task force. That just meant more violation letters. Meanwhile, the ground was shifting. Foundations cracked, lawns sank, mold crept up walls. Resentment simmered, thick as the floodwater. Neighbors avoided each other's eyes at meetings. Whispers stopped when Linda passed. She thrived on it, strutting around with her HOA badge like a dictator. She even showed up at my door, demanding a landscaping plan to fix my drainage issues. I asked if it should account for her concrete wall. She blinked and threatened more fines. I smiled, signed her form, and added it to my binder of evidence. Nature doesn't forget, and I knew it was only a matter of time. The 3rd week of rain was biblical. Skies turned black, and the air smelled like wet earth and ozone. Streets became rivers, manhole covers spewed geysers, and lawns vanished under dirty lakes. Houses started to break, cracks climbed walls, doors wouldn't latch, garage floors buckled. I watched from my porch, coffee in hand, as Linda stood in ankle-deep water, screaming into her phone while her rose bushes drowned. Her perfect suburb was a swamp, and she couldn't stop it. The HOA scrambled sandbags, gravel dumps, lawsuits against the city, but the truth was obvious. It started with the creek. Then Linda made her fatal mistake. She marched to my porch with a violation notice thicker than a novel, accusing me of causing the floods. I listened, sipped my coffee, and said nothing. Because I had a secret. That night, I dug through my garage and found an envelope from my grandfather, stuffed with old surveys and a 1978 letter from the county confirming my creek as a protected drainage easement. The HOA had broken the law when they filled it. I made calls to the county water authority, the city environmental office, requesting inspections for unauthorized drainage modifications. Then I went anonymous. Using a burner email, I sent my drone photos, easement documents, and county code violations to news stations, newspapers, and local forums. I waited. 3 days later, county trucks rolled in. Inspectors spent hours measuring the concrete, taking samples, and shaking their heads. That night, a news segment aired, showing our flooded neighborhood and hinting at illegal drainage changes. The next morning, a county violation notice hit the HOA. Linda stormed into an emergency meeting, ranting about slander and conspiracies, but the projector showed my photos, concrete pouring, easement maps, red-lined codes. The room went silent. Even her loyal board members squirmed. She claimed it was temporary erosion control, but when asked for proof, she had nothing. The news turned brutal. Words like illegal and criminal penalties flew. Residents spoke out, fearing mold and sinking property values. Lawsuits brewed. The county posted violation notices, and city inspectors red-tagged homes, including Linda's, as unsafe. Insurance companies denied claims, citing HOA negligence. Foreclosures loomed. Linda's house was condemned, and she moved into an RV sinking into the mud. The HOA collapsed at a final meeting, dissolved with a bitter vote. Linda dragged shredded documents out under a marshal's eye. But the story didn't end there. The neighborhood voted to restore the creek. With county grants and volunteers, we dug out the concrete, replanted grasses, and set stones to guide the water. When the creek flowed again, clear and alive, it felt like the land exhaled. I carved a sign and planted it at the creek's head: "Saw nature always wins Saul." Not spite, just truth. Linda left soon after, her RV limping away. New families moved in, drawn to the restored creek and wetlands, unaware of the war we'd fought. I still sit by that creek, watching the water dance, listening to frogs at sunset. The land endured, just like I knew it would. It always will. Nature doesn't care about your rules or your concrete. It waits, it remembers, and when the time's right, it wins. Every damn time.